morning, everyone, and welcome back to Wake and Take. It's your boy, Jason. Wi-Fi's fixed. The bunnies are good. The birds are good. We've got coffee and a fantastic, wonderful, super special guest, Theo Gremminger, the man himself, will be joining today to give us some great fantasy football takes around everything that's going on. We're going to predict league winners. We're going to talk sleepers. We're going to talk buys, sells, all that stuff going on. Of course, we're going to talk Brandon Aiyuk. So go ahead, take out your coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. The OG. How's it going?
I'm ready. Big apologies to the Wake and Take audience. My kids are home from school this week, so a little bit of carpool issues this morning, but ready to talk about league winners. I got big drafts tonight in New York City. Have 2 live NFFC high stakes drafts, so I'm tilting all day, Jason. I'm just tilting.
How much money you losing tonight, Theo?
Well, we don't lose in the NFFC streets. I'm a known player there. I'm very badged up. I have one team in a prime time, which is the equivalent to, like, if you play FFPC, it's kind of like their main event. And then I'm in the New York Super. So the New York Super is like one of the biggest high stakes drafts in, like, the East Coast for sure. I split the team with Nelson Sousa of FTN every year, and you have like a murderer's row, like Billy Wazowski, Chris Vaccaro, Chris Ebel, all NFFC Hall of Famers, a few other really, really well-known players, Glenn Lowy, and those guys are, like, I mean, legitimately some of the better drafters in the country. But we came very close last year and the year before in that league. We cashed last year. It's been very, very unfortunate. Like Nelson and I, we had Puka last year. We drafted him. We drafted Puka Nacua. We had a bunch of guys like that. We had Rashee Rice, like a bunch of guys like that hit. But it was injuries at the end get us every single year. So this year we're drafting out of the 10 hole. And then in the prime time, I have a 12 spot, which is, you get the third round reversal. So 12 is like a kind of a big challenge these days, but I get picked 25 as well. So we're cooking in the lab which way I'm going to go in that. And then I go to Vegas on Tuesday. So this is my time, man. This is my money making time. We'll see how it goes.
Man, living life. That is awesome. Best of luck to you in those drafts. And I gotta say, I'm a 12. I'm a late first round drafter. I don't know why. I much prefer it. So I think you'll do well.
Well, I don't know. So that's a big question. So, like, FFPC, you have the tight end premium, so you have, like, more flexibility at the 12. You could push up one of those tight ends and get, like, an elite tight end. Mm-hmm. But, like, in regular PPR 3 wide receiver starts, I feel like it's a challenge right now, Jason, because, like, people are getting Jahmyr Gibbs at, like, the 205. Yeah. So you're already dealing with people who are, like, dealing with a lot of, like, mid Jahmyr Gibbs. And then you don't get access ever to Garrett Wilson at the 12 anymore. Like, he goes at like 10. He was a guy that was an easy click early in the summer. And so I feel like you're kind of punching up. You've got guys like Drake London, guys like Marvin Harrison, guys like Jahmyr Gibbs. But all of those guys, I feel like I'm punching up with, like, the drafter at, like, the 105 who has access to, like, Breece Hall or Bijan or wide. Like, if Drake London and Marvin Harrison, if you take them at the 12, 13, go wide receiver, and those guys finish like wide receiver 6 and wide receiver 7, they both beat ADP, but they're not league winners. So I don't know. I feel like it's challenging. A lot of years, the 1-2 turn has been, like, amazing. Mm-hmm. But this year, I don't know. I feel like it's a little bit of a tear break after 10 right now in PPR.
It is. You've got to set your flag, and you've got to be right. For me, I've been doing lots of Marvin Harrison Gibbs, Marvin Harrison Saquon. That's kind of where I'm going there. I'm just reaching for those. I feel very comfortable.
No, I love Marvin Harrison. I think he's a stud. And shout out to Uncle Ted in the chat. So, like, the NFFC, if you try to go big hero RB starts, like, it's a super wide receiver heavy format where it's start 3 wide receivers with the flex. And it always gets dried up. So I even had a team last year. That had, like, Bijan, Saquon, Kyron Williams, Devon Achane, and that team was really, really good. But you're still like at a challenge and a disadvantage. That team had Aiyuk, that had a really, really monster team, but you can't get boxed out at wide receiver. It's just really difficult, even with a third round reversal. You're like 48-49. with a third round reversal, you get boxed out by some of those guys. So not to get you too off subject, we're talking league winners, not Theo draft strategy.
Hey, we the audience appreciates it. I'm sure it's a good little stuff to talk about. And speaking of Aiyuk, you stumbled into the Brandon Aiyuk trap. It finally happened, Theo. Something finally happened. We finally have the news. Shout out everyone for bearing with me over the summer here in the Wake and Take audience, where I was about to just pull my hair out every single time we got a stupid update that I had to talk about.
How many Wake and Take thumbnails had Brandon Aiyuk on it this summer? Over under
Christ.
like 15 maybe 20.
At least that's a really good over under right there. Like, cause so it was just all the time. And every time I just said he's going to be a 49er until something is otherwise. And here we are, full circle. He's a 49er, 4 years, 120 million, 76 of it guaranteed. Fine enough contract. My big takeaway is Deebo Samuel is probably not going to be a 49er after this season. Where are you at with this situation?
I think you're right. I think that Deebo, based on the money that they paid Aiyuk, also considering that they have Kittle locked up, I mean, they got to pay Trent Williams. Mm-hmm. It's hard to envision Deebo Samuel. And also, there's a chance it could be like a team-friendly Deebo deal. I don't know, though. I think he would get big-time money in the offseason. Like, you're going to have a market this coming offseason. Guys like T. Higgins, guys like Deebo. We're seeing these wide receiver contracts. They're all really loaded. And when you put those guys on an open market, like, there's going to be teams that are going to break the bank for Deebo. I mean, and look at what Mike Evans got this past offseason to see what like a 30-plus wide receiver got. So you're probably right. It's really kind of disappointing because Deebo's like at this point, like a legendary 49er, like one of the most well-liked guys, like a weapon of mass destruction, puts his body on the line, but it's not sort of the profile you want to put a ton of money into if you're the organization. So I think you're right. But Aiyuk got paid. He deserved it. He's stud. What he did on 105 or so targets last year, the guy's excellent. And if there's ever a situation where we see like Brandon Aiyuk get 135 targets, he's going to explode in terms of his fantasy football production. Yeah, no, I mean, were you taking the dip? Were you drafting him while he was falling? Yeah, I mean, I think that anytime you had access to like 5th round Brandon Aiyuk in these drafts, I would do it. Yeah. I certainly took him in some dynasty startups. I had him in one pretty high stakes FFPC dynasty startup, and I have a pretty good amount of exposure to Aiyuk. It was one of those things where most of these situations just get settled. The question is, though, guys who hold out sometimes are slow out the gate. Do you see a little bit of a dip in his first 3-week production? That matters depending on your format, depending on how your league playoffs are set. Like how in what shape is a guy like Jamar Chase, a guy like Brandon Aiyuk in? CeeDee Lamb seems like a maniac. The guy put like 15 pounds of muscle on this offseason, talked about how he's got armor on. Like, I don't worry about CeeDee Lamb, but I don't know. It's probably overthinking it. 5th round, Brandon Aiyuk can't hurt you. Some people were still taking him in the end of the 4th round. But yeah, I think for the most part, you treat these guys as you normally would. The one exception would be getting a little bit nervous on the Jamar Chase. Jamar Chase, like, and I'm not saying to drop him considerably, but if you were like a Jamar Chase over Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jamar Chase even over like a Justin Jefferson drafter, you might want to adjust if you draft this week and just take the points, because I think there's a chance Jamar Chase misses week 1. Just my gut. I hope not. You know, the Jamar Chase situation is kind of different, right? Like he's 2 years early on this. He still has a couple more years on his contract, whereas everyone kind of holds out going into that final year of the contract. So I'm kind of hoping at some point he just sucks it up, because I am one of those people. I'm definitely a Jamar, I've been a Jamar Chase stan this offseason. I feel like this Bengals offense is kind of going to get back to at least the playoff team. It's his only leverage is to hold out. Like, and it makes no sense because, again, like, we're saying that it's his first contract. Like, all these guys are wealthy, but he's not like mega wealthy like some of these 30-year-old, like a Devontae Adams is. Mm-hmm. So like a 50 grand here and there is going to really hurt his bottom line. But at the end of the day, it's like, why are the Bengals slow playing this? Just pay the guy. Like, you know, and also every time you wait, you end up paying more. Like, you look at the contract that Brandon Aiyuk just got, the Jamar Chase camp is not going to accept that. And you look at the contract that CeeDee Lamb got, they're probably going to be very close to like the CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson range. So just pay him. You're a team that was 2 years removed from the Super Bowl, and he is the focal point of the offense. Like you said, no Tyler Boyd, 2 new running backs, Yoshivas and Burton getting broken in. Like T. Higgins right now is in a pretty good spot, but at the end of the day, it's like just pay Jamar Chase, just pay him.
I agree. This, like, you have the opportunity to lock down one of the best wide receivers the game has ever seen. Like, just don't get cute with it. Just get the guy. Just get the man. So that's our anything else on this kind of holdouts, Brandon Aiyuk situation in general before we move on?
No, I mean, I think the Trent Williams situation is very noteworthy because the splits with Brock Purdy again, and it's, you don't have a massive sample size here, but with Brock Purdy with Trent Williams and Brock Purdy without him, it's significant. And this is a team where everything sort of worked out well for them. They were a low volume passing attack, and Purdy still put up huge numbers. Trent Williams has been is one of the best players in football, certainly at his position. I think that's a very noteworthy one. But again, it's sort of like now it becomes how effective is Aiyuk out the gate? Does CeeDee Lamb have maybe a slow week one? I don't think so. I think CeeDee Lamb end of the day could have 15, 20 targets against the Browns. So that's going to be a fun one, Jason. That's I was looking at that line. It's Cowboys is a short road dog. I think I might be on the dog there.
That I don't hate it. Now I will say this: is there a single game in week one that's not fun though? I mean, like, I could have the Jets playing the Jets second team, and I'm like over the moon. You know?
Well, Cincinnati, New England might not be fun. It's the projected total is like New England's team total is projected to be like 15 points. Like, I'm working on a defensive streamers video and article. I'm going to drop some of these. I did start doing them at the end of last year. It's like defensive streamer videos here on our Player Profiler YouTube, and it's like Cincinnati is the biggest layup ever week one. They're huge favorites. They're going up against a team with a bottom 5 offensive line any way you cut it. And the team is projected to have 15 total points. That game might not be so fun to watch. Cincinnati could take the air out of the ball in the second half. And that might also be a game where you don't necessarily get the biggest fantasy production from your Bengals because they're just going to be in complete control just based on what Vegas is saying. And then Carolina, New Orleans, that's another game where Carolina's projected to have a low point total. But I'm super interested in that one, as you are, with the Dave Canales, Kubiak, like all these new storylines for that game. So week one is always just amazing.
I know, I'm so excited. We're less than a week away until Thursday Night Football. I can't believe we're finally here. It has been a grind going through this offseason, Theo. You've been a big part of the offseason here at Player Profiler, obviously head of content. And one of those big things you put together was the draft kit. We're heading into one of the biggest draft weekends of the year. So let's just hear a little bit about the draft kit. But before we get into it, Theo, I don't know if you've seen this yet. We've started doing some trivia questions before the ad break. Guys, who was the last rookie running back to lead the NFL in rush yards? The answer coming up after this.
Hey, it's the Podfather. I have great news. The draft kit is live. It is world famous. Why? Because it is the best resource for winning fantasy football championships that exists. There are rankings and cheat sheets for every format you can imagine. We have projections both at the team level and the player level. And wherever you are, you can click on a player, open them up, and see in-depth written analysis about what to expect in fantasy football from that player this year. And then you can click on the team and you can get even more in-depth analysis, all the drivers of fantasy production, both in a positive and negative direction for that team, including a signature trend. And the graphics are incredible. So these team insights, they give you the team level projections, the vacated targets, the vacated air yards. And we added a bunch of features. I mean, individual cheat sheets for Theo and Billy and Dario. So you could take your favorite analyst and download their personal draft cheat sheet. And then in the commissioners section, Memphis Young lays out everything you need to know to manage a league. The best minds in the industry contributing analysis. It's certainly not the most inexpensive draft kit on the market, but it is the best. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. PlayerProfiler.com/draft kit. Go get it.
Go get that draft kit. It'll help you win your league. And in 2017, you would have won your league if you had this rookie running back who led the NFL in rushing. Nobody guessed it, unless I was wrong. Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt in 2017 had 1,327 rush yards, leading the NFL in rushing. Theo, did you expect that one?
No, I was thinking it wasn't Saquon. Saquon had 100 catches. I was thinking it could have been Zeke. Zeke was up there his rookie year, but I overlooked Kareem Hunt. That was that legendary game 1 where Kareem Hunt was like that. I mean, it was unbelievable that first game.
That whole season, it was just like that there's a weird career from Kareem Hunt as it happens in the NFL. Now, I want to go ahead and ask you a question about roster cutdown day. That was this week. And my big question for you is who made the cut that maybe was kind of a bubble player that you're really excited to watch this season?
You know, it was somewhat uneventful cut day. I think I always look at sort of the younger players that made the roster. One thing that I thought was interesting was, and I know they're bringing him back, but the Browns cutting Deonta Foreman, who was somewhat like the only guy that was sort of a like for like a homeless version, like I was going to say poor man's version, but like super like really, really poor man's version of like Nick Chubb stylistically, like a guy who could handle volume. And instead sounds like Pierre Strong is the number 2 back to Jerome Ford to start out the year. So to me, that sort of signals that like this Browns offense is going to be a little bit, we talked about it during the offseason where it's Ken Dorsey. And people hate when I bring up Ken Dorsey and anything positive because people didn't like him in Buffalo at the end. But it seems like they really want to have pedal to the metal, be more pass happy, be a high tempo offense. And that sort of indicates it to me where they're going like Pierre Strong behind Jerome Ford. Because you look at those two guys, neither one of those guys is a guy that we anticipate will ever get a 20 carry game. So I think there's going to be some targets there. I think that's interesting. And then I think that just from the cuts, Denver Bronco running backs, it's we talked about, Javante's risen up. But like Jaleel McLaughlin and Audric Estime both have more cleaner pathways. Ryan's a guy where, he's had back-to-back years of 50-plus catches with 2 different teams. He's a guy that commands targets. Offensive coordinators love getting him involved as a pass catcher. So to me, it's like the Denver Broncos running backs all have opportunities to score fantasy points this year. I think it's definitely going to be Javonte to start the year. Estime, though, is a guy that's very easy to like as a back-end roster guy. He's potentially a guy who can handle volume. And then I think Jaleel McLaughlin just steps into like a Jalen Warren-like role where they don't have a whole lot at the wide receiver position outside of Cortland Sutton that's established as a target earner. So I think McLaughlin's going to be a very useful back to have regardless of what happens with Javonte versus Estime throughout the year. So take your shots on Broncos running backs. I like double tapping if you're in a 20-round type draft this weekend and you take Javonte, just take Estime in the 15th round. If you take Jaleel McLaughlin, you can still take Estime and just have a little bit of access to that situation. I think it's going to be a one that we're going to be happy we drafted Broncos running backs.
That might be the one decision I've made this offseason that ends up burning me. I had no conviction in this backfield and just went elsewhere, really. When I'm attacking the Broncos, I've been going just after Nicks and the wide receivers for garbage time. I'm just not sure how they'll look. I wanted to see it play out. But that's, part of the risk of fantasy football. Sometimes you just got to take these risks and they will reward you. And the Broncos running back's kind of trending that way. I'm excited to see how it ends up playing out. Now, Theo, along the same vein, I had Alan Seslowski on yesterday. He asked me a very interesting question. I believe you're taking over for Waiver Wired this year.
I am.
So this is right up your alley. And guys, make sure you get ready for that, Theo, on the Waiver Wired weekly waiver live stream this season. But Alan asked, he was like, who's this player that we're not talking about right now, that no one's talking about right now, that everyone's going to be rushing to pick up after week 1 on their waiver wire?
That's an interesting one. It depends on how deep your league is. I think it's going to be one of these rookie running backs that's like a direct handcuff is going to see more work in week 1. I think that there's, again, like the context for waivers, it's always like in certain leagues, some guys are 100% rostered. And then in like a 15-man format, they're going to be out on the waiver wire. But I think it's going to be with the split backfields. With all these split backfields, I think there's going to be guys getting work. I could see a situation where like Bucky Irving gets 4 or 5 catches in week 1 and looks good, gets mixed in as more of a handcuff plus. I think that there's a situation where Jordan Mason gets a little bit extra work in week 1 with Christian McCaffrey. They're not really trying to overload him. And also that's a tough defense with the Jets. Do they go with a little bit more Jordan Mason in that game? Christian McCaffrey, of course, is going to score his points, but
Right.
I think it's going to be one of these handcuff running backs. You didn't get like that huge injury at the running back position that created a path for someone. And then I think when it comes down to it, there's always a tight end, always a tight end who shines. And you could go a number of directions. Again, it's kind of league specific here. But I think there's a few tight ends like Isaiah Likely. I think he's going to be the number 3 target in Baltimore. You could see him having a nice game against Kansas City. So it's really hard to say. I do think that if you have a league with a preseason waiver wire run, like a lot of these leagues coming up, like you're going to have a Tuesday or Wednesday waiver wire run, make sure you have Jordan Mason rostered. He's a guy that slipped through the cracks in some of my early drafts. Jalen McMillan, make sure he's not on a waiver wire. The Bucs were in 11 personnel, like top 5 in the NFL in 11 personnel groupings last year. And I think McMillan could flash. And I think Bo Nix is going to have a solid first game, Jason, because I think he's going to run for some yards. So there's a number of guys there. I see Permar in the chat. He's agreeing with the Bucky Irving, but he makes a good point. Like Samaje Perine, I got Samaje in the 19th round consistently. Now in some of these high stakes formats, you're seeing Samaje go in the 11th round. So it's sort of like, do we see? It's very polarizing. Billy Muzio doesn't think it affects Isaiah Pacheco at all. He thinks it's an indictment on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and maybe they don't have as much comfort in like Carson Steele. Yeah. But for me, I don't know. Samaje, it's kind of a Jerick McKinnon-like vibes. And I think that if Isaiah Pacheco were to miss time, then Samaje Perine would be a guy we'd be really happy to have on our rosters because he would get 5-6 catches a game in the Kansas City offense. I mean, so yeah, all of these high-end handcuffs, especially nowadays where there's more and more handcuff pluses, these are the kind of guys you want to make sure are not on your waiver wire. Ty Chandler, like a bunch of these guys, they're very, very interesting.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to bring up because that's a strategy that we all start to implement. You know, a couple weeks into the season, we remember like, oh, we need to take these flyers for our bench in case they pop off this week and then become the waiver wire pickup. So definitely go ahead and start stashing some of these people that, you know, could benefit from an injury or just get a little bit more opportunity than you expect. Some players that we talked about with Allen yesterday, Emmanuel Wilson on Green Bay with AJ Dillon now on IR. Just no one's talking about him.
We talked about him on First Class Fantasy yesterday. Like we pre-recorded it, but
there you go.
Wilson, the first, like until Marshawn Lloyd gets back, like with the way that LaFleur uses running backs, like Wilson could be an interesting player. I do think that that's a short-term one because I think Marshawn's really good. But yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, there's some interesting ones. So go take some flyers, guys. I'm just so ready for week 1. And by the way, guys, before we head into week 1 in our next segment, next week's going to be conviction week here on Wake and Take. We're getting all of our takes out for the season, some of my favorite takes from the offseason, stuff like that. So make sure if you're ready for that week, that's all next week, the true Wake and Take hot take week 0 heading up to week 1. So make sure you're getting ready for that, which will lead us into the next bit. We want to figure out who these league winners are, Theo. On Monday, I plan to figure out the biggest bust and the biggest value at each position. But who are some dark horses that could actually end up leading their position in scoring? We'll start with the quarterback. Who could end up being quarterback 1 that not enough people are talking about?
Now, I don't know if he has quarterback 1 potential. That's a tall task, but I do think that there's a lot of arguments right now that Jordan Love is going at a really, really attractive range in the drafts. Mm-hmm. Like you hear a lot of, we talked a little bit in the pre-show, like there's a lot of late Josh Jacobs steam. Yeah. And sort of the late Josh Jacobs steam is sort of everything I hear there is sort of an argument for just draft Jordan Love. If this offense takes a huge step forward, I think Jordan Love is a guy that could make a significant impact. And I think that the way people are really valuing as they should, the high rushing upside quarterbacks, the guys like Kyler, Anthony Richardson, Jaden Daniels, I certainly have exposure to those guys, but you get Jordan Love sometimes rounds later, round 9, round 10, Jordan Love, I think he could end up being a potential big time like win rate guy at the quarterback spot. He's very easy to correlate. I drafted him like twice this week, And
Yeah.
it's not like it's sort of he just keeps falling into that range. Quarterback this year, like there's another argument that we're back to sort of playing chicken at the quarterback position where the truly elite guys sometimes fall in drafts, where last year you'd have to take a guy like Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts at the 2-3 turn. Now, depending on your league, like people wait on quarterback. The top quarterbacks also could end up giving you high win rates because sometimes you're getting those guys as like late 5th round picks. And how much could a guy like Josh Allen hurt you? So quarterback's a little bit funny, but I do think Jordan Love right now in late drafts has become a value with sort of the way people are pushing him to kind of his own little mini tier below the high rushing upside quarterbacks.
Yeah, I think that's a really good choice because there's not many quarterbacks. In fact, this might be the only case where people are steaming up like the wide receiver 5 on a team. Because I mean, like we have Bo Melton fans on Twitter. We've got Dontavian Wicks fans. We've got the Christian Watson fans, people who just suck it up and take dubs and Jaden Reed, like when you have that many weapons that people are hyping up and the quarterback's not getting hype, like that has to raise some alarms. He's very attainable. He's going after some quarterbacks that he outperformed last year. He was a top 5 quarterback. So and now going into like a second year, like a true second year, after getting acclimated last season, that's a great call. What about the running back position? Who could end up being RB1 or just, very highly outperform their ADP?
Well, for me, running back's a little bit funny right now. Like I think that the big three are the big three. I've been somewhat, I wouldn't say fading Christian McCaffrey. I've been less enthusiastic about taking him at like the 101 than some people. I've usually gone with a guy like CD at the 101. I've been sort of liked my teams where I got like 6th overall Bijan, 7th overall Brees. Like those builds end up looking better to me than ones where I'd have to take CMC early. So for me, I really like those guys. And then I really like the Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, those year 2 backs sort of behind them. I'm not really into Jonathan Taylor at his ADP at all. I think it seems sort of like a purgatory ADP for me. A little bit lower, I like the Travis Etienne's value. Yeah. Derrick Henry, when he falls, is a good value. And Ken Walker has been a guy that I'm kind of warming up to more and more as the season moves along. Like Ken Walker, I think they're actually going to use him as a pass catcher this year. And I don't think there's something where he's going to go nuclear, but I do think this coaching staff wants him to be a 50 reception guy. Yeah. And he's never cracked 30. So that's a significant one. The guy has back-to-back seasons with 9 rushing touchdowns, back-to-back seasons where he's about 13.5 PPR points per game. If that ticks up and Seattle's offense is a higher tempo, more scoring opportunities, and more opportunities to catch passes, I think the Ken Walker teams are going to be very strong. And then one thing I'm going to continue to do is I'm going to continue to draft rookie running backs. Yes. Like the second half of the draft, we've have this is the most discount we've ever seen at the rookie running back position. A lot of these guys are contingent plays where you're going to need an injury or a guy to underperform for them to get the pathway. But I think just based on the price, based on some of the situations these guys are in, and the two-way ability of some of these backs, I think second half of the season, you're going to be happy you drafted some of these rookie running backs. So I'm into kind of open with my running back builds right now. I definitely am probably avoiding a lot of those second-round running backs, but when those guys like Achane, Travis Etienne, Derrick Henry are in the 3rd round, I definitely will take some shots on them. Second round sort of become a wide receiver round for me, or some of the elite tight ends in FFPC.
That's fair. I like those picks as well, especially Kenneth Walker. I mean, you don't have to sell me on my boy K9. Been beating the drums for him all offseason. I'm very much excited for a big, true bell cow season from Kenneth Walker. And you're right about the rookie running backs. I mean, like, you look at last year, Kendre Miller was going higher than Marshawn Lloyd for some reason. You had Tank Bigsby going around the same range as like Jalen Wright. And like none of them have the athleticism or the upside even of any of like this year's rookie running back class. I know that they didn't get drafted as high, but the athleticism that Marshawn Lloyd, Blake Corum, Kamani Vidal, Jalen Wright, those 4 in particular, are able to bring from the middle to late teens in your drafts, it's just insane to me. And I don't even think it's going to take an injury for a lot of them. Like, I think Marshawn Lloyd, when he comes back, he's going to get some opportunity. I think Blake Corum's going to be able to push Kyron Williams some. I think Jalen Wright will get mixed in here and there. And we've been fading Kamani Vidal because he didn't have an exciting August or July, but nothing changed. Like, it's still very much he's going to have an opportunity at some point this season to be a bell cow. There's no way J.K. Dobbins lasts the whole year. There's no way Gus Edwards lasts the whole year. And
and I'll say you also have a Marshawn Lloyd dropped significantly in ADP. Yes. And you're going to have to sustain, like, you're still able to get Marshawn Lloyd like cheaper than you would have in June. And the situation has actually gotten better with A.J. Dillon heading to IR. And we're not, people kind of scared of the early season injury. Like, we're not drafting for week one. You don't want like week 1, week 2 take lock. You want to have, a season long view of your guys. Kamani Vidal, I'm glad you brought him up. I think he's interesting. I think in that backfield, you can double tap J.K. Dobbins and Kamani Vidal, sort of a Gus Edwards is not going to impact anything kind of fade. But I'll say Braylon Allen, Bucky Irving, Kamani Vidal, Ray Davis, and now Trey Benson, Jason.
Yes,
Trey Benson's been a
Trey
guy
Benson.
completely beat up. And now it's a situation where Michael Carter got cut. So the whole Michael Carter got cut, and you have a James Conner is a solid value where he's going without a doubt. I think that when we talk about this Drew Petzing offense, James Conner's in a good spot for the beginning of the season, but James Conner misses time every single year. Trey Benson's the same guy that when we drafted him, and now you're able to get him in the double-digit rounds. So there's all this contingent upside. You brought up the athleticism of the class. You brought up the pass catching ability for some of these guys. Like, I like walking away, especially in my 20-round drafts, with 2 or 3 of these rookie running backs. Will Shipley in the 18th, 19th round, Audric Estime in the 18th, 19th round. So continue this thing. Just keep going a little deeper.
Dylan Lobb. Let's just keep going.
Dylan Lobby, I got bags and bags of. I do think they're going to try to run Zamir White into the ground early in the season.
Yeah.
It's just a very solid rookie class. I think dynasty managers who invested in the position are going to be happy because it didn't cost you anything. You didn't have to use any first round picks on these guys, save for Jonathan Brooks. And then in redraft, you're getting all of these guys after round 12.
Yeah.
Trey Benson, though, shout out to the chat. The chat doesn't want me to talk about Trey Benson. Trey Benson, guys, just draft yourself from Trey Benson.
No, he looked kind of rough that first preseason game, but then he kind of got back on track, and with the Michael Carter cut. And I mean, James Conner has never had a fully healthy season. He's been very productive, but he's always missed at least a couple games. So, I mean, you definitely got to get some Trey Benson on your team. Wide receiver, Theo, who could win our leagues as the wide receiver position?
Oh, well, I'll say that every time I do a rankings update, it's really hard to push this guy above the guys in front of him. But I always feel like I'm low on Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson, I think, has a chance to. There's some parallels right now to Garrett Wilson in ADP and situation to what we saw with CeeDee Lamb last year, like the wide receiver going at the bottom of the first round. And if everything sort of works out, you could see Garrett Wilson being a top 3 pick in the NFL draft, in the fantasy football drafts next year. Like, he could blow up. It's an elite target earner. He checks off all the boxes. The wide receiver target competition is not too high with guys like Malachi Corley and Mike Williams, Alan Lazard. None of those guys are really going to threaten Garrett Wilson's workload. The offense needs to take a step forward, but you could also see Garrett Wilson, like, the guy never scores touchdowns the previous 2 years. That could sort of all explode, and he could go for 10 plus touchdowns with 165 targets, catch a ton of passes, and absolutely smash. So I think he's super interesting. I still really love the values of Marvin Harrison Jr. and Malik Neighbors. And then I like taking shots on Brian Thomas late. I think that there's a chance that Brian Thomas leads Jacksonville wide receivers in PPR scoring. Trevor Lawrence has been a big driver for fantasy success for whoever leads him. Christian Kirk finished as wide receiver 12 2 seasons ago. Last year, Calvin Ridley finished as wide receiver 18. And that is all while Evan Ingram was a top 5 tight end. So you're getting Brian Thomas at this discount. I think he's a beast, and I think that he's athletically gifted. And I think he can do a little bit more with the ball in his hands than some people are ready for. Not to mention he's going to inherit a lot of those red zone looks. So I think he's a really strong value. There's a lot of values at the wide receiver position. I think it's just a matter of take your shots on guys, get them before we sort of see a big fall off. Like, sort of the fall off to me, it's like once you see the Cortland Sutton range go, then it sort of drops off a little bit. Like the Jamison Williams, Cortland Sutton, all those kind of guys, like the wide receiver 4s. When you get past that, it gets a little bit hairier. But I like several of these wide receiver values. I think Rashee Rice, he's steamed up in ADP. You're not really getting that great value, but I think Xavier Worthy, Rashee Rice are both going to get off the fast starts in the season. Travis Kelce, people hate it, but I have been kind of fading him at ADP. I just am more into a couple of the younger tight ends this year. When a guy goes from 18.5 points per game down to 14.5 points per game, I know he was hurt. I know he played through injuries, but at the end of the day, you never want to see an older player drop 4 points per game and then have added target competition. Kelsey's still going to be the first down guy, but I do think Rashee Rice and Xavier Worthy are interesting. So wide receiver, there's a reason they get steamed up. And Jason, I could go all day on this. I have bags of Chris Olave. I have bags of Jalen Waddle. I talked about Malik Neighbors. I think he finishes as a wide receiver 1. There's multiple guys here. I see Uncle Ted in the chat, Zay Flowers. I have some Zay Flowers. I was drafting Zay Flowers and you get a discount. Now he's sort of steamed in some of these wide receiver heavy formats. You're starting to see him go a little higher. So wide receiver is deep this year, but you still want to get your impactful players early. There's a reason, like you talked about earlier, like why are we pushing all these wide receivers up? Because there's some guys here who are going to explode from like that wide receiver 3 range.
Yeah, it's really awesome.
Not to interrupt you. I see the London in the chat. Yeah, Drake London. We got to pay like the 12th pick for him. So I'm fine with Drake London as well, but no discounts there.
Yeah, no discount on Drake London. I am unfortunately fading him at his current price. I'm going to latch on to Garrett Wilson because this is a player that I haven't really been convicted on, but the more and more I think about it, the closer we get to the season, the more I'm just kicking myself. I just am. I mean, you look at Player Profiler, and I mean, the stuff that you need to see. Led the NFL in routes run, was 6th in expected fantasy points per game. Like literally should have had 20 points per game last year and didn't. Had only 13 because of the touchdowns, because of the quarterback play. Aaron Rodgers and his connections getting better. His number changed, good stuff coming from Garrett Wilson. I really do think. And then Brian Thomas Jr., all the athleticism in the world, 1st round draft capital, great landing spot, had a ridiculously monster season last year alongside Malik Neighbors. And he's not really getting that much hype. I agree with you there. Like he really does have the potential to be the alpha in Jacksonville. It might take a few weeks, but he has the athleticism to do it. He's got the quarterback to unlock him. I think that that's going to be one that people are upset that they didn't take their shot on. Like instead they got Keon Coleman or Lad McConkey when he could have just gotten BTJ, could have been fun. So let's move on to tight end. You talked a little bit about Travis Kelce, and I mean, I'm sure your answer is Dalton Kincaid. But who's winning us in our league from the tight end position?
Well, I think that the high end tight ends, like the non Travis Kelce ones, the Laportas. I am not worried about anything with the hamstring. It sounds like Laporta's ready to rock. Nothing significant. Trey McBride, I think, is going to be very, very effective, and certainly Dalton Kincaid, I think, leads Buffalo in targets. But what's interesting is when you get past those guys, and usually it's sort of like a fish move, a square move to attack the back half of the tight end ones, because the hit rates historically are usually not that great. But I think this year there's some parallels in the David Njoku situation this year at ADP to what we saw with Evan Ingram last year at ADP, where people are sort of discounting what actually happened on the field. They're making excuses sort of not to draft him. I think David Njoku is a really, really good value. I think Brock Bowers is a great value where he's going. Jake Ferguson is a guy that I've never pounded the table for. But in non-tight end premium formats, tight end premium, Jake Ferguson, I think goes a little too early. But in non-tight end premium formats, I think he will be the number 2 target on Dallas. So I think he'll be the clear number 2 target on Dallas. So I think that the low end tight end ones, it's really a year where I think you want to prioritize having one of the elite tight ends. And if you miss on having an elite tight end, you want to attack the bottom half of the tight end ones. I really do think there's a drop off. I think when you look at guys like Dallas Goedert, Pat Freiermuth, that level, that's a drop off to me significantly from the guys above them, like the Njokus and the Bowers this year. And yeah, I see in the chat, absolutely. Like Kyle Pitts is gonna eat. Kyle Pitts is gonna smash. I have bags and bags of Kyle Pitts. I think that you can make a great case for drafting Evan Engram once again. See PPR Tyler talking trash to me. in the
We were
chat.
going to address that in a second. Are you scared to arm wrestle Tyler?
No, I'm not scared to arm wrestle Tyler. Tyler's seen me in the weight room. We've lifted together. Shout out to Tyler Knable. Make sure you're following Tyler Knable on Twitter. Tyler Knable is going to be one of our hosts for our tailgate shows, and I'll do one plug of one player profiler thing. We're going to have 3 tailgate shows this year. Tyler Knable is going to be joined by John McGlynn, a really strong veteran podcaster. They're going to be doing it on Monday night. You have Mike Lindbergh, who you know from Player Profiler News, doing Thursday. And then Stacey Perez on Sunday nights. A big shout out to Stacey Perez. I think Stacey Perez is a fantasy football star, and I think people are going to love watching Stacey on Sunday evenings. Really sharp drafter as well, Stacey is. So the tailgates were something that when I kind of took over, I wanted to have. And Tyler was really strong with them last year. We had Seth doing some last year, but this year it's going to be even stronger with consistent hosts. And it's going to be sort of like, if you want your fantasy football fix before Monday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, and Sunday Night Football, Player Profiler is going to be the place to be right here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to see those shows. I mean, I'm assuming we're kicking off next Thursday heading into that Ravens game. So
Mike Lindbergh is ready to rock. Nice. And I know Stacey has some stuff cooking, and my man Tyler is living on YouTube, so he could do a tailgate show like right now. Tyler might even do a tailgate show for Clemson, Georgia tomorrow morning.
Tyler, I know you're still here. It sounds like you need to have a college football kind of pregame as well as a best ball draft tomorrow. It sounds like. I think that'd be a fun one to tune into. I'm going to ask you this, Theo. You gave a good list of some of these tight ends at the back end of a tight end 1 range that could definitely outperform their ADP, maybe finish top 5 or something like that. Of course, Kyle Pitts is my choice there, but I'm finding myself going right back to the TJ Hawkinson a lot, 14th, 15th round. It feels too good to be true.
Yeah, TJ Hawkinson's another way to play. So structurally, a TJ Hawkinson pick, it causes you to have to draft maybe more tight ends. Certainly Tyler could talk about this. Like if you're drafting TJ Hawkinson on Underdog, you're in a 3 tight end build, which is fine. And I've seen some very sharp FFPC and FFC drafters prioritizing Hawkinson. You can do like a Hawkinson combination you just need somebody to basically get you through like the first month of the season.
Right.
The market hasn't tilted, because when we first were drafting Hawkinson, it's sort of the underdog effect. People were treating him like he might miss 10 games. Now it looks like he's going to miss 4 games, 5 games. So for me, like it totally works out. You could go with a Dalton Schultz combination with TJ Hawkinson, like somebody to sort of get you through and get you to Hawkinson. You need a bridge tight end. So like a Freiermuth, Hawkinson, that would be kind of doable as long as it's not tight end premium. But yeah, I agree with you. I think Hawkinson's a fine value, especially if you get boxed out at tight end from those top 12. You're also seeing more and more people double tapping the position, which is usually like a low EV strategy to double tap tight end. But when we're trying to, basically the cheat code for tight ends is, if you want to get league winning production on the tight end spot, they need to be top 2 in targets on their team or lead their team in targets. The number 3 target earner for tight ends, I believe that there was 0 in the top 12 last year scorers that were not top 2 tight ends. So like occasionally you get a guy who scores a ton of touchdowns. Think about like an Eric Ebron situation years and years ago where he's not a huge target earner, but he gets a ton of touchdowns. Like that happens, but that's sort of like a thread the needle approach. So when you look at the tight ends, though, you're talking about guys like McBride, going to be number 2 in targets to Marvin Harrison. Laporta should be the number 2 target. Kelsey will be the number 1 or number 2 target. Dalton Kincaid will probably be the number 1 target. Evan Ingram, number 1 target. Like, we want to bet on those guys. And when Hawkinson returns, he's shown that he can consistently be a big-time target earner. So I'm totally with you, especially with Jordan Addison being banged up. Hawkinson has a really nice path once again.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a sicko. I'm doing like a lot of Kyle Pitts, TJ Hawkinson teams just to kind of box out everyone else from tight end, and then I think he'll be a flex play at worst. If I really have to do it, and then like you mentioned, you can bridge the gap with some other tight ends, or you can gross with it and just Tyler Conklin. So sicky.
That you don't want to get so that's the thing. I don't think you want to get too gross, and I think like sometimes we get the underdog mentality. Where on Underdog, you can go with I love getting Jonnu Smith in like best ball. But
Yes.
I bet Jonnu Smith is a bye week fill-in at best in redraft, and I do think he'll score touchdowns, but it's hard to predict those weeks. I'll say the one cheat code, if you're in your league, if Taysom Hill is tight end eligible, just draft him. Because this is a situation where Kendre Miller's on the IR. You have Alvin Kamara is getting older, and everything sort of worked out perfectly for Kamara last year. Not saying he's a fade, but there's a reason Alvin Kamara's ADP is where it's at. Taysom Hill, this new coaching staff, this new system, they view Taysom Hill as a guy that they want to use in a weekly role. We don't know what that means. Does that mean he's just a change up and they use him? But what if he's the goal line back, Jason? What if he is in the Wildcat QB? We don't know. And I think that there is a scenario where Taysom Hill leads New Orleans in rushing touchdowns this year and has a career year. This coaching staff is effusive in their praise for Taysom Hill. The tight end people, like my guy Andrew Cooper of Fantasy Alarm, they absolutely hate it when I bring up Taysom Hill because they'll say he shouldn't be tight end eligible. Well, he is. He's tight end eligible in NFFC. He's tight end eligible in Yahoo. He's tight end eligible on Sleeper. And I believe he's tight end eligible on ESPN. So FFPC has him as a quarterback. Can't really deal with that unless it's a deep best ball format. But if Taysom Hill is tight end eligible, that's the one you want to walk out of your draft with. And if I'm wrong, then you could cut him after the first month of the season. It's not going to hurt you because I'm recommending guys like a 15th round pick. Taysom Hill, just draft him if he's tight end eligible.
Yeah, I got boxed out of tight end and Scott Fishbowl because of the premium, and Taysom Hill fell into my lap. That's who my tight end one is, and I'm getting pretty excited about it, hearing everything, because there's even a chance they used him on special teams last year. There's a chance he's their damn kick returner too. I know they have Rashid Shaheed, but one thing that I'm noticing about this kickoff change is it's going to be different. Teams have strategies here. Bill Belichick was coming out and saying Derrick Henry should be returning kicks. There's so many ways to attack this. We have no clue. And
we don't know.
We have no idea. We'll find out, but we have no idea.
Taysom Hill is the returner. The guy's it's like trying to tackle the Terminator.
Exactly.
The T-1000.
That's exactly what Bill Belichick was saying. He was just I feel like size is going to be really important because they're going to have the time to get up to speed where they normally don't on a regular kickoff. And then it's just going to be hard to tackle them. So anyway, I'm very curious to see how this kickoff rule change goes. I'm very curious to see how the Saints use Taysom Hill in general. I think that's a great second, third tight end to get for sure, just in case. So Theo, we've made it to the hot take. Give us your 2024 hot take. I know you've had a few this offseason with me, but give me another one.
CeeDee Lamb sets the NFL all-time record for targets in a season. Marvin Harrison Sr. has 205. I said it on a couple of shows. I think CeeDee Lamb, it's a perfect storm. 210 targets. Dak Prescott's trying to earn himself a new contract. CeeDee Lamb wants him to get there. We will see the CeeDee Lamb usage post bye week for the entire season. The guy's put on weight. They're going to get the ball in his hands. People don't necessarily love this one. The projections people, shout out to my guy Billy Muzio, they hate this one because it's a sort of a vibes one. Do I think he'll get 210 targets? I mean, it takes a huge leap. Is he probably a 180 target guy? Yeah, but does everything work out for Dallas where they're going to have to pass a ton? Their running backs right now, they have two running backs who are older than Jason, Zeke Elliott and Dalvin Cook. We don't need to check Jason's driver's license, but they're about the same age. And then you also have Rico Dowdle, who Rico Dowdle's in a great spot, but Rico Dowdle, even if he gets 100% more touches, doubles up his touches, he's still not going to be in a high volume situation. And I talked about Jake Ferguson. Jake Ferguson is the number 2 target. Jalen Tolbert, Flournoy, Brandon Cooks, none of those guys are going to be massive target earners. So CeeDee Lamb to the moon. CeeDee Lamb is going to be the back-to-back wide receiver 1, which we haven't seen in quite some time since Antonio Brown. CeeDee Lamb might outscore what he did last year, and it's going to be on the strength of targets. The wide receiver 1 for 3 straight years has led the league in targets and led the league in catches. It's simple. CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver 1.
I love it. I love it. And that's probably good for Ryan Flournoy too, because that means Brandon Cooks isn't doing shit if CeeDee Lamb is getting that many targets. So we'll take that as a Ryan Flournoy take as well, Theo. Thanks. Gotta throw that in there. Every episode we have a Ryan Flournoy take at this point.
Gotta get it in for you, Jason.
Thank you. But I like that take. I mean, no one else is really getting targets there, and Dak Prescott's still going to be asked to throw a ton, and the defense looks actually worse this year. So I like it. I like it, Theo. As always, fantastic having you on, man. Thanks for taking time out of your morning on Dad Duty Day. You had the car rider line and all that stuff going on this morning, but you've made it, and I couldn't be more thankful. Tell the people, I mean, they already know, but tell the people where they can find you and what you're going to be working on this season.
I'm dropping a press coverage today with Cody Carpentier and Alan Soslowski. We recorded it last night. Superflex strategy. And I have a First Class Fantasy dropping tomorrow with Billy Muzio. Dropping videos, dropping articles. Make sure you're following. We're actually about to cross 26,000 YouTube subscribers. So if you watch our shows but you don't subscribe, hit the subscribe button. We're about to cross 26,000. Jason certainly is a big reason for that with all the hard work you put in at Wake and Take. But we're grinding out here. We have, I think, the best season ever in terms of written content coming up. Every single day at playerprofiler.com, you're going to find a free article that's going to help you win in fantasy. We have some really, really talented writers this year. Guys, like Matt Babich, Seth Dewald, Dan Williamson, Bradley Stalder. I write 2 articles every week. Usually, sometimes I sneak in a third. So we're grinding out here. It's going to be a big season. I think that all of our, just to kind of pump some other shows, Fantasy Empire, our tailgates, First and 15, we have 32 beat writers on the podcast. Like, we've made significant strides here at Player Profiler to bring you the best content possible. And we have a partnership with Keep Trade Cut. Yes. We didn't announce that one yet, but we'll give a Wake and Take announcement here. On every single player page on Keep Trade Cut and every single player page on Player Profiler, you will find a link back to one another. 2 of the most trusted names in fantasy football content, working with one another. This has been a long time coming. Super thrilled about this one. So stick with us here at Player Profiler all year long. We're going to help you win your leagues 100%.
Yes. This is the best place to be. Get the draft kit before your drafts this weekend. Get the all-in package if you haven't. Make sure you're checking the news page, the articles. You're subscribed to Player Profiler, the content that's coming out best in the game. Everyone. And Theo, thanks for joining. Thanks for hopping on. Thanks for watching, everyone. You all have a fantastic Friday. A wonderful weekend. Don't forget to like this video, and don't forget to subscribe to Player Profiler and Player Profiler News. Have a good one, and see you Monday. Peace.
From the Podfather to you, I deeply appreciate you tuning in. And many ask, what can I do? What can I do to help support the hosts, the research they do, the production costs? Go to playerprofiler.com. Dynasty Deluxe, World Famous Draft Kit, Rankings, DFS Dominator, and of course, Data Analysis. Subscribe to any one of those, and you support all of us and take Player Profiler to the moon.